The future is green. Yes, green means sustainable, but we're talking about the green, commonly known as hemp, ganja, weed, or cannabis if you want to keep it small. But the world of weed and cannabis is much bigger than smoke and mirrors. I'm Lakai Natasha.
I'm Dr. Snap.
I'm Kendall, the farm plug.
And I'm Antoine Mordican.
And this is Growing the Green.
Welcome to family. This is Antoine Mordican, your Alabama State Director, and I'm here to provide you all with some local news updates as well as national news updates. So the first thing I would like to talk about on the local level is that Alabama is still moving forward with the medical cannabis program. I know a lot of licensees that was actually issued a license actually have inspections coming up next week from the commission, and this will be the pre-commence inspection to give them the okay to start operating. Myself has been inspection set up for March 1st. I think that's next Friday. March 1st, where they'll be looking, coming through the inspection, giving us the okay to go ahead and get everything operational. So for those companies that are actually be cultivating, you got to have certain parameters in the space. That's security. You got to have your growth space and everything in place. You got to have your fencing and everything together, and actually have the feasibility, to be able to start cultivating after they do their inspection. So we got a lot of great things coming. There's a lot of rumors going on around as well in the cannabis space here in Alabama. You got folks that still, currently suing the commission, trying to get them to ultimately issue them the license. We're also in the new legislative year in session, so we be on the lookout for new bills coming forward that's going to be directly talking about cannabis. And I would like to talk specifically about SB 42, which is a decriminalization bill, which I don't say is true decriminalization because you still get charged with a misdemeanor and a small fine and citation. However, you won't go to jail. But it depends on how much you get caught with. What's your purpose? If it's a personal use possession, or if you're intending to traffic, then with a different lane. But I would like to encourage everybody to look up SB 42 and please support it. It's the bill is it's the fourth year that this bill has been presented by Senator Bobby Singleton. We need to make sure we get this bill out of the Judicial House Committee, so we can officially get this bill to the floor and actually get a vote, so we can at least provide some form of decriminalization here in the state of Alabama as we continue to grow the medical program here in the state of Alabama. And in national news, I would like to talk about an article that I just seen that says marijuana does not increase car crash risk, but drinking alcohol does, studies finds. So I thought it was a pretty interesting article because a lot of folks like to tend to talk about cannabis and the intoxication that it provides to certain folks. But, just from my experience with cannabis and alcohol, I drive fast on alcohol. When I'm on cannabis, I tend to be a law-abiding citizen, and I drive under or at least the speed limit. But this study was conducted last year to pretty much support that cannabis alone does not increase the risk of having a car crash, but if you're on cannabis and alcohol, it does. And this research was performed by Oregon Health and Science University, the University of Colorado School of Medicine, the University of California, Davis, the Insurance Institution for Highway Safety, and Portland State University. And there was some others that was a part of that research as well. But I want to be able to shine a light on that national study that cannabis alone does not increase car crashes in the United States. However, alcohol does, and it always has, but it's increased with alcohol and cannabis. So with that being said, that's all that I got for the news, and I'll pass it over to you.
All right. So we ain't advising nobody to drink and drive or use cannabis and drive, but hey, statistics are statistics.
And it's very interesting to have these statistics as we talk about new legislation in Alabama, because if you guys remember early, the Alabama Medical Cannabis Commission, one of their topics was that if you receive a medical card to utilize cannabis, that your license should be revoked. Right. So will we actually be considering this piece of science as we move forward in
That
the
is correct.
political space in Alabama?
I think we should use it going forward, especially for those once we continue to fight for the patients, to make sure that nobody get their license suspended for being a medical cannabis patient for getting the medicine that they necessarily need. Without Alabama instruction, you have to have more than 75 milligrams daily. They want you to pretty much suspend your license. But hopefully, we can encourage some legislation change in that in the future.
Absolutely.
And also, I think maybe people should be aware too of the Safe Banking Act. It is still pending, as far as I understand. So that is something that will open up different various financial institutions to be able to legally enter or deal with those who have already entered the cannabis industry. So we've been talking a bit about that in previous episodes, but it is still, as far as I understand, on pause, waiting on the Senate committee to make any revisions or to pass it or to drop it. Right? Am I right, Antoine?
Fingers crossed, we finally get some motion.
Okay. So those are just some things for people to be aware of as well. And of course, I want to shout out Smart. Nadir made an awesome post too about a couple of different things that people need to be focused and be paying attention about or paying attention to nationally and the implications that they will have on state and local levels. But one of those things that is also a national hot conversation, which is our topic of today, is this conversation of scheduling, descheduling, rescheduling. What is scheduling? Who's the schedule man? Who gave them that power? What are all of these things? What is that?
So last week we talked about scheduling, but I think we had a few nuances around the different levels of scheduling. So as we revisit scheduling in its connection to the larger conversation, there are 5 different schedules, and schedules classify drugs based on their medical implication and their likely to be addictive, or likeliness to have addictive properties. So anything that is labeled as a Schedule 1 drug is something that's accepted as not having any medical use, and a high potential for abuse. That is Schedule 1. No medical use, high potential for abuse. Let me say the schedules, and then we can see if clarity is still needed.
Well, I wanted to ask you all's because I think some of the nuance in it is right, like the word drug, right? We're talking about a medicinal cannabis industry, but then we're using drug enforcement language. So I just kind of wanted to pick you all's brains before we dive into the scheduling aspect, which deals directly with drugs and also some medicines that need to be controlled, right? But because the scheduling was created by the Controlled Substance Act,
So
right?
everything that's scheduled is the term drug is used to define everything that's scheduled. It's a drug schedule. It's not a
So
medicine schedule. It is a drug schedule. It is drug scheduling.
And
so
the schedules go from, 1 to 5, with 1 being the most, you know, what would you call it? The higher,
No benefits.
what would that be? The efficacy
It
type drug,
so 1 having no medical use and
and
high
5
potential for
having.
abuse. 5 being low limit for abuse. So the scheduling it is based on medical use only at Schedule 1. Because anything that's listed as Schedule 1 is determined it does not have medical use. Everything between Schedules 2 through 5 do have medical implications. At that point, they're just being graded based on their potential for psychological or physical dependence, which is different from the term which is used, and this is coming straight from the DEA's website, which is different from the term used under Schedule 1, where it says high potential for abuse. So things in Schedule 1 aren't actually classified based on their potential for dependence. It's just called abuse. And I bet, to Candace, to your point, this is going to go more into that this or that kind of language, because we're going to classify it as abuse because we said it was illegal. Right? But then if we say it's legal, now you're just dependent upon it. Now you have this drug, right? It led you to dependency. It's the drug, right?
That's
It's the
lit.
drug's fault if in schedules 2 through 5, but in schedule 1, you're making a choice to use something that they say was not medical, and so now it's your fault.
Right. Some of those,
Because cocaine is not on schedule 1.
correct. That's what I was thinking. Like, you thinking about some of these drugs that will fit in these categories, like heroin, ecstasy, LSD, steroids, cough medicines, right? But where do these drugs fit on that scheduling aspect, right?
To your
So
point, cocaine is actually listed as a Schedule 2 drug, which means Schedule 2 drugs are substances or chemicals that are defined as drugs with high potential for abuse, with use potentially leading to severe psychological or physical dependence.
methamphetamine, oxycodone, fentanyl, those are also Schedule 2 drugs.
So wait, are you saying that the DEA is saying that based on schedules that cocaine has medicinal use?
I think that's very interesting that you brought that up, because that is my question too when I look at this. Only in Schedule 1 do they clarify that these drugs don't have medical use.
Correct.
Only in Schedule 1 do they say or chemicals are defined as drugs with no currently accepted medical use. So in
Right. That's Schedule 1.
only in Schedule 1. So, but to Candace's point, they don't say Schedule 2, these are drugs that have been proven to have medical use, but also have high
That
potential.
part.
They don't clarify, as much as they declassified Schedule 1 for not having medical use, they do not clarify the medical uses of cocaine or the other things
Methamphetamine,
that are listed,
oxycodone,
right, that are
fentanyl,
listed in Schedules 2 through 5. But
right?
to
You go
your
to
point,
Schedule 3, what's some of the examples, like steroids, anabolic steroids, ketamine, or what they call K2.
some
That's Schedule
examples of
3.
Schedule 3 drugs are products containing less than 90 milligrams of codeine per dosage.
Testosterone, that's considered Schedule
Testosterone
3.
is on there. Can
Schedule
you
3.
speak to testosterone being a drug?
Hey, that's for those bodybuilders and stuff like that, with the anabolic steroids. You know what I'm saying? They kind of
Steroids,
fit into
anabolic
that
steroids,
category
ketamine,
of what they were trying to regulate.
or Tylenol with codeine. Apparently, Tylenol used to have codeine in it. It's also listed as Schedule 3.
That's Schedule 3.
It's like finding out
Hmm.
Coke was in Coca-Cola. It is in Schedule 3. And if we move to for our sake, Schedule 4 drugs are chemicals defined as drugs with a low potential for abuse and low risk of dependence.
Ambien, right?
Yeah.
Xanax,
Yes.
Valium,
Yes.
right?
Tramadol.
Tramadol.
Yes. What do
Okay.
people use tramadol for?
I mean, I remember we used it a lot in horses. You know what I'm saying? As a horse,
Horse tranquilizers.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
Sound like the drugs that was heavily lobbied for.
It sounds like the drugs that are what?
lobbied
It
for.
sound like the drugs that was heavily lobbied for. On that too.
Well,
Right. So we'll read about the Schedule 5. Let's talk about that real quick.
Schedule 5 drugs, substances, or chemicals. Those are all the words used to define these things. Are defined as drugs with lower potential for abuse than Schedule 4 and consists of preparations containing limited quantities of certain narcotics.
Right, so that'll be like,
Narcotics can still end up in Schedule 5 as long as the
correct,
dose is low.
yeah,
Schedule 5 drugs are generally used for anti-diarrheal, anti-intrusive, and analgesic purposes.
analgesia. It's like
Analgesia.
anesthetizing, or you know what I'm saying, making
putting
something
people to sleep.
unconscious a little bit. But cough medicines containing codeine.
Cough
That's one
preparations
example.
with less than 200 milligrams of codeine or
Yep,
per
yep.
100 milliliters Robitussin.
Certain low dose prescription medications. You know what I'm saying? But you know, so Schedule 5 is, you know what I'm saying, pretty much where I would put, my opinion, marijuana or cannabis in the Schedule 5 aspect of it. You know what I'm saying? But
That's what,
currently, right now, where does it land?
well, it's in Schedule 1, and they're talking about moving it to 2 or 3.
So they saying right now, currently, marijuana is equivalent on the same playing field when considered scheduling, on the same level as heroin, LSD, ecstasy, and marijuana.
Well, it's very
That's
interesting.
crazy.
We're hoping to loop in some individuals from the medical industry.
Hey, I'm Khadijah Higgins. I am a licensed pharmacist in the state of Alabama. So currently, marijuana falls into the category of a Schedule 1 drug. And like I said previously, Schedule 1 drugs are classified by having no medical benefit and only having a benefit of altering some type of behavior or abuse. So we already know that not to be true because marijuana is currently being used, or THC rather, is being used to treat seizures as well as chemo-induced nausea. And that's both of those I have seen in practice. So that's something that's currently being done and has been occurring for the last few years. So it's interesting to me because fentanyl, meth, and cocaine are Schedule 2 drugs, meaning that marijuana has a stronger regulation on it than some of the most powerful drugs that are known to, be deadly. And marijuana does not really carry that risk. So it's very concerning and it's very confusing why there's such a strict regulation on this particular substance. Also, whenever it comes to punishment, penalties, or any type of legal consequences, you will have a stricter legal punishment as far as dealing with a marijuana substance versus dealing with, meth. And it doesn't make sense because the consequences of using the substances are totally incomparable. You also have your scheduled drugs that are placed on a stricter regulation by the state. So the way that the classification works, the federal government and federal law will always take precedence. So even though you might have some states where marijuana is considered legal, federal regulations will trump all, no matter what. So until a substance is federally legal, it's still illegal in a way, no matter what the state law says. But the state law also has the opportunity to come in and make stricter regulations than what the federal government says, which is why we see so many inconsistencies from state to state to state to state when it comes to this particular substance. Now, I personally believe that marijuana should be either not scheduled at all or consider Schedule 5? Because we do know that there is medical benefit, so that moves it out of the category of a Schedule 1 drug. We are not going to see the same abuse potential and the same risk of harm and danger that we see in our Schedule 2 drugs, which is our fentanyl and all of our opioids, any type of strong sedatives, meth, cocaine. We're not going to see the same, consequences as we do as our Schedule 2. Schedule 3 and Schedule 4 drugs, they're mildly regulated, and it really just has to do with, it's more of a preventive type thing than it is a, whoa, we gotta, keep a close eye on these drugs. It's more so, let's just regulate it, keep an eye on it, make sure people are using them accordingly to how the evidence shows that they won't cause harm. And let's limit quantities of people actually having access to these particular substances and medications. So yeah, when it comes to Schedule 5, that's kind of like the state comes in and they can decide if they want to make it control or if they want to not make it regulated. So for example, there's a drug, it's called gabapentin, and it's a partial opioid, meaning you get some of the benefits of an opioid without so much risk of harm or abuse. So when it comes to marijuana, I feel like it could fall into that category at the least, just because it would allow it to be federally legal and not federally illegal as a Schedule 1 drug. And then the states would have, their opportunity to pass their state laws to say how they want to classify, if they wanted to be Schedule 5 or if they wanted to be not scheduled at all, which it still imposes a way more fair grounds for it because it is being used as a medication. So why do we have people being punished to the highest extent of the law when it comes to medications and drugs and all of that for something that's being used as a medication, just like these other drugs? So yeah, I mean, those are my thoughts. I would love to have more dialogue or answer any questions. My email address is Khadijah, KADIJAH 031 @gmail.com. If anyone wanted to email me any questions or comments or any discussion that you would like to have. Thank you so much for allowing me to share my thoughts on this. I appreciate this podcast and everything you guys are doing. Thank you and have a good one.
To your point, the most interesting thing to me, my mother's been a nurse my entire life. I was born in 91. And my mother's been in positions where they have had isolates of cannabis for the last 2 decades. Like my mom was telling me about cannabis isolates being given to patients, years ago. And obviously they're labeled differently. They've been isolated and marketed, or they're owned by particular companies, so they're coming up in other names. But the fact that we've been utilizing cannabis in the medical space for decades, and we're just now getting to the point where we actually want to reschedule it. Like, who, to your point, Candace, like, if everybody's making the drug scheduling, like, when do you change this? Why does it take what is actually the motive to
Of the
reschedule
scheduling.
cannabis? Because it's not because you found out it has medicinal implications, because we already knew that. So what's the real motive of rescheduling cannabis?
Yeah, so since the Controlled Substance Act was signed into policy in 1970, I'm doing a little research and I'm trying to figure out when has it been amended. Like when did they start making changes?
Like, how often do they revisit the scheduling and things like that? Because we
Exactly.
Because we also recognize, well, I don't know if that was a rescheduling bill, but Antoine, remind us about, fentanyl went up on one of these SBs last year. Was that kind of like a rescheduling? It wasn't a rescheduling
That wasn't a
situation, but it was like a
rescheduling.
review
That was
situation.
addressing that was addressing the penalties for folks that
Mm,
was caught with fentanyl. Since fentanyl was running rapid here in the state of Alabama, it was having a lot of overdoses on it. They had their own, I guess, controlled substance or narcotics bill that if you're caught with so much, this is your penalty. So like if you was caught with cannabis or any form of cannabis, receiving years, 10 to 15 years. But if you're caught with cocaine, you get so many years and the penalty and the fine. Or if you're caught with fentanyl, how many years you get. That's the bill that was revisited last year. So it wasn't too much. They didn't really make changes to it. They just made sure they added stricter penalties for fentanyl. But they kept cannabis the same, which a lot of us in the industry, we're here in the state of Alabama, of some of the organizations out here, we thought they was adding cannabis to the list to continue to criminalize it. However, it's been on that list since the 70s, you could say. But the recent bill was to address the fentanyl use and the fentanyl sale and the distribution here in the state of Alabama. So it just increased those penalties and laid those out. If you caught with it, you're pretty much going to serve a life sentence depending on how much you caught with it.
Yep, the Comprehensive Drug Act, Comprehensive Abuse Prevention and Control Act, to be specific, 1970.
Mm-hmm. And here I'm seeing that the last time that there was an amendment was to address anything that is chemically similar to fentanyl. So in 2018, they made amendments to be able to capture, because what also was happening, and even they have here in 2012, the Synthetic Drug Abuse Prevention Act was a subtitle. So it says synthetic drugs added several amendments that describe synthetic cannabinoid chemical spaces that are also controlled as Schedule I substances. However, since then, many new synthetic cannabinoids not covered by this act have emerged. So that is basically talking about, so in 2012, they were already doing or aware of people of the different types of cannabinoids and people's ability to basically manufacture cannabinoids the same way we manufacture pills. People were doing that. And so that's where they did that in 2012. And I think in 2018, since fentanyl has been on the rise, and also with fentanyl, like a lot of other street drugs, you may get fentanyl, but it may be cut with a whole bunch of other stuff. So that's why they said fentanyl-like chemicals or cannabinoid-like or synthetic cannabinoids. So they're working to be all more encompassing is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify for our audience, we mentioned it a little bit last week, but cannabinoids, the two that we mainly talk about are CBD and THC, but there are hundreds of cannabinoids within the cannabis plant. And then also to your point, Candace, they're constantly being discovered. They're being isolated, which means they're being extracted from the plant, where we're just looking at this one of a million chemicals that the plant can make. We're looking at just one, and then we're learning, when we talk about it being synthetic, we learn how to recreate that chemical structure, and that's what we did. Instead of having to grow a lot of cannabis plants and isolate this one chemical structure, we learn how to create that chemical structure in the lab. That's when it becomes synthetic. Then we mass produce it, and now we have a new drug on the market.
Ain't that exactly what K12 is? A cannabis like synthetic made drug, and that was what, a Schedule 3 or a Schedule 2, based on the list.
Yeah. Let me look.
What did you say, K12?
Yeah, cannabis is that a scientific name for it.
You talking about ketamine? So ketamine is on Schedule 3.
That's it.
Yeah.
Schedule 3.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
But see, that's interesting though.
Synthetic cannabis.
And that's what I was about to say. So now this brings us back to that question of a drug or a medicine. Like, is something a drug because it is synthetically isolated and mass produced and copied and pushed out? or does that make it you see what I'm saying? Is that a medicine? Because really all of the medicines or majority of the medicines that people encounter on their day-to-day visit, almost everything is derived from a plant, right? So it's like we come across a plant, we learn about these things the plant can do. Well, really what happens is indigenous people were using this plant. We figure out why they were using the plant. Then we start to uncover the genetic code, right? And understand what actually makes this plant what it is, what gives it its traits and characteristics. And then we figure out what we want to isolate, or what is the part of this plant that is giving us, that is most profitable or most useful. And then, like you just said, Lakaya, instead of growing that plant over and over and over, we'll just isolate this one little part. But does that make something a drug, or does that make something a medicine? Like, how are you all defining what is a drug and what is a medicine?
When I think about the difference or the the differentiation between a drug and medicine, I think about perception, because it depends on who you're talking to, right? If you're talking to law enforcement, or if you're talking to someone in the science or medical field, someone who treats patients versus someone who, determines verdicts, or determines people's fate sometime when considering the drug, versus the medication. So I think it's subjective to who's, how that drug is interpreted by the person who's using it, and the people who are because you'll get a different opinion from someone who's actively taking the cannabis for an ailment that they may be having, versus someone that may always prosecute people in a courtroom, versus, that would be the big difference of opinion when considering what I would think.
A drug versus a medicine.
Yeah, I actually had that conversation a lot with my mother, the difference between what's drug and medicine. So,
Breaking
what
up.
makes medicine in a lot of cases is it's just in its natural state. My thing is, like, medicine is something in its natural state. So like cannabis, that's what the conversation is happening about cannabis. Cannabis in itself is natural. You don't have to do anything chemically to it. But when you start to have to chemically induce a lot of these medicines, that's when it becomes a drug. When you have to start adding base things to it. But you start with the extraction. But once you push it through a chemical process where you change the physical properties of the medicine, that's, in my opinion, when it becomes a drug.
So, Antoine, I really love that definition, because we say things like food is medicine, and we would never say food will.
But actually, you know what's funny? I just saw a post, somebody on Twitter, and they was like, go ahead and name the most the most addictive drug in the United States.
It's
and people
food.
And no, it's not even just food.
It's sugar.
Sugar.
It's sugar.
Sugar.
It's sugar.
It is
comes
right.
from the
To
sugarcane
your
plant.
point.
Mhm.
But yeah, we would never say, we're right, we wouldn't call food a drug. And so I'm looking at Merriam-Webster's definition, and under the first definition, here is according to the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. The third definition under there, a substance, and this is a definition for drug, a substance other than food intended to affect the structure or function of the body. And to anybody's point, for me, myself, if I'm popping any kind of pill, herb, allergy, pain, it's all drug to me. I call pills drugs, all of them. So I kind of like the direction that Antoine kind of took us to, in like this natural state of medicine, which we can find in nature. To your point, even Candace, right? Anything that we have that ends up as a prescription medication, it started out in nature. But nature doesn't move as fast as the human concept or the convenience of humans. So that's where we get the production of synthetics, right? We started that with like cortisone, right? So we get the production of synthetics because we can't make nature move as fast as we'd like. And then we get into this drug or
Yeah, but I also think it comes in like again where we start trying to control everything and that we start breaking stuff up. But one of the issues that we're dealing with right now in the cannabis industry is that everyone has been so quick to hop on the THC bandwagon. Everyone was so quick to hop on the CBD bandwagon that we skipped the steps of doing the research to understand what is all encompassing, to understand how all of these properties actually work together. Right? Because what's happening now in a lot of stores, I don't know if y'all have been seeing it, but I've been seeing a couple of articles where they're talking about THCA versus THCB. And really, THCA is just THC. It's just that moment before you spark it, and then it becomes like that combustible form.
same
Right?
with Delta
So,
8. Mm-hmm.
exactly. So it, I feel like, I feel like people were so quick to try and capitalize on the industry that we skipped all of the necessary research. It's like we went from locking people up, right? Doing a little bit of research and locking people up to still locking people up, trying to capitalize. And now it's like the research is almost, if not totally out of the window, it is a total, it feels like an afterthought to a lot of people that are entering the industry based on, you know what I'm saying, even our own conversation, what we were talking about earlier. It's like, I think people become aware of it and then it totally takes their mind. So think about it this way. If I'm a police officer, right, and all of the conversations that I hear about this thing are all from a capitalist framework, they're all from a drug abuse framework, I'm totally removed from the space, right? I have blinders, exactly. I got tunnel vision around the way that I'm engaging this plant. I can't even fathom the fact that it can be used other ways because the industry has totally skipped over all of the necessary research and development that needs to happen just to hurry up and capitalize on it. To which I bring it back to what you said, Lakaya, why are we trying to rush? And to me, the question becomes, how do you legalize something that you, at this point, right, with the cannabis industry, the question then becomes in the same way that we're asking about a drug versus medicine. What is the difference between, you know, someone who was locked up on kingpin charges and the CEO of a pharmacy, of a pharmacology company, right? Like these are kind of the nuances that we're faced with, that the industry is faced with. But I don't know if the proper people are in place. Well, I mean, we're the people in place to kind of challenge the industry and where it's going, right? That's why we're having these conversations. But I'm just wondering how impactful, or, you know, maybe this is a research question that somebody needs to investigate, but how do these nuances and our perceptions of drug versus medicine impact the way that we perceive this medicine or drug and the potentials of it down the line and the way that we engage it, even from a purely research and scientific perspective?
So I actually dropped the article. It's only 2 pages, but I think it deserves us to consume all of it. It was put out January 16th this year from the Congressional Research Service. And the title of it is Legal Consequences of Rescheduling Marijuana. And I'm hoping that in reading this, we can maybe come to our own ideas about who is the greatest benefactor of rescheduling. Because when our community asks for rescheduling, we're coming with criminalization and decriminalization too. We're not just rescheduling. When you reschedule, we're going to come for the people that you've locked up, right? When you talk about our people, and of course, you know, I always play on the same side, but I can't believe in totality that everyone is excited about releasing all of the people that they've labeled as criminals for their relationship or prior relationships with this plant. So I'm hoping that, you know, we can take some time to review this, and in our next episode, maybe give it 5 minutes to see who's the greatest benefactor of rescheduling.
And once they let these people
Pharmacy.
out, they should not exclude them from anything dealing with the industry. They should not be excluded from participating or, having some type of contribution. That would be wrong within itself as well.
I mean,
Well-
and then to Antoine's point about just releasing federal prisoners, let's take away exclusion from the market or the industry. People who get labeled as federal inmates, they come out without basic rights. These people come out, they can't secure housing. These people come out of jail, they have hard time getting jobs. They cannot vote. So literally their access and how they manipulate or move through the community, they can't even dictate because they can't even engage in the voting process. Better yet, engage in this industry, right? So
There is no smooth process for felons to get into society, to be law-abiding citizens. And I'll speak to that just in general that, now that I am owning the cannabis space and I'll be growing cannabis, with me even seeking employees, and, trying to employ certain folks, I can't employ a felon or anybody that has any drug charges. Like, I think that's crazy that I can't, hire a felon that could have possibly been arrested for cannabis. But now he's been a law-abiding citizen for the last 7 to 10 years, but he's still unable to even work as labor in the industry that we're now taking advantage of.
And even further than that, right now, this gets into, all those other conversations and like reasons that people need to be aware of. I forgot the name of that policy, but a couple weeks ago, we were just down on Capitol Hill because they're trying to make it illegal. Yeah, they're making it illegal to help people fill out ballots. You know what I'm saying? So, and the gag is once you go to jail, you don't just lose access to the cannabis industry, you lose access to governmental support. You lose access to food stamps. You lose access to affordable housing. You lose access. You have to put that on every job you apply for. You lose access to your ability to vote and exercise your dignity, right? Exercise your voice as a human and citizen of a country. Like, these are greater implications. And what's happening in the state of Alabama is, really what needs to happen in the rest of the country, right? But what they say, so goes Alabama, so goes the nation, right? Like, if we not having a conversation down here, right? If Alabama is able to make helping your grandmother with her ballot the equivalent to statutory rape, right? If they are pushing that type of policy and nobody's paying attention, what do you think they're gonna do, right? With the cannabis industry, there is no question about what's going on, and it's interesting because really, I've been seeing, and I think even in us doing this cannabis work, I noticed that a lot of people may not be interested or they don't feel like they have a dog in this fight. But I think really a lot of people have a dog in this fight. A lot of people need to pay attention to what's going on to this cannabis bill, or cannabis in the state and in the country. If not only because, you're in America, right? Or you may be around people that are engaged in these things or whatever, but us as Black people, especially, right? The Black community, right? As the community who has been the most impacted by the war on drugs and will stand the chance to lose the most with climate change from this crop if we can't engage it and use it in society in a responsible and sustainable way. We're at a turning point on Earth scientifically, environmentally, that we may not be able to bounce back from, right? So these are all of those implications that are kind of coming down right now, and it feels like a lot of balls to juggle. But that's why we're here, and we're helping the people break these things down so they can learn. No one can grow the green alone. It takes a community that's willing to learn together and sow seeds of growth. And those are the seeds that we plan to keep on sowing here at Growing the Green. So let's keep reaping, learning, and sowing together. Till next time.